All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today on the ROI of SEO. I'm Chad Hill and I'm joined by Adam Stetzer and our crew in Rochester.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chad. We're really excited to be here. This is an outstanding topic. We know there's a lot of interest in being able to concisely articulate the return on investment for SEO, so we're real excited to get into your materials. But before we do, I'd like to ask everyone to say a hearty hello to our resellers on the phone today. Hi. And we're ready to go.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's start off with a definition of ROI. It's return minus investment over investment. And so typically people speak of this in terms of percentages. And, you know, honestly, the formula is pretty simple, but sometimes getting in and defining some of these components are easy. Now, obviously, the investment is usually pretty easy to calculate, but you will find that people calculate and talk about return in a couple different ways. So for marketers, it's usually convenient to look at the total revenue as the return. But you know, if you get into an organization, and especially with the business owner who understands that they have costs associated with that, they have to pay people, they have to buy a product to put into someone's house, if it's a heater or a heater or an air conditioning unit, whatever it might be. So some people will want to get into cost of goods sold, and we'll want to talk about gross profit. Sometimes people want to talk about gross revenue, which would be cost of goods sold plus your sales, general administrative expenses. So really, you know, it doesn't really matter which one you look at, because typically you just set your ROI threshold based on that. So what I mean by that is that if you want to be looking at something like just gross revenue, then you know you might need to set a higher ROI target to take into account the fact that you have cost of goods sold and that you have other expenses in there. So again, for today, we're going to be talking about ROI in general. All three of these you'll run into. All of them are right. You just have to define how you're coming up with your return, and then of course, based on how you calculate that, your target ROI thresholds will change. In addition to sort of understanding the calculation, you also need to have a general sense of a marketing funnel. And so the marketing funnel is really the steps from the initial interest of a customer all the way through, prospect I guess you should say, all the way through to them becoming a customer. And sometimes funnels can be very short, and sometimes it can be very long in terms of the number of steps involved with them. An e-commerce customer's funnel is generally going to be all on the website, whereas an attorney or someone else who is actually converting people after an initial consultation or after a phone consultation, it might involve both online components all the way through to filling out a lead form or making a phone call, and then a secondary offline component to it that ends up going all the way through to a person becoming a customer. So understand it. I think that one of the key things is that you can usually, by understanding their funnel and then listening to the information that a prospect is giving you, you can sometimes fill in the blanks if you don't have all the information. So if they're talking about customers, and we're going to get to this in a minute, you need to understand, like, well, if I'm talking about leads or visitors and they're talking about customers, I need to know what are the conversion rates from a visitor to the website through to one of their customers, because if I don't understand that funnel, then I can't really convert their need for customers into our need to understand search terms and clicks and conversion rates on a website. So you have to understand that full marketing funnel. And again, many of you out there totally get it. Some of you may have never heard of it before, but make sure you understand that. So when I think about SEO, there's really two ways to sell SEO, and I see different people trying it different ways, and actually I'm sure there's actually far more than two ways. But I'm going to simplify it today into these two. If anyone has any other ideas they want to throw into the mix that we can discuss today, feel free to chime in our chat window. But I think that there's one way is sort of selling the binary. Do you have an optimized website or not an optimized website? And so the nice thing about this is that there's tons of tools out there. We talked about the one that we've been working with in our last webinar, but literally there are many, many website grader type products that will come back and say, your website is either optimized or not. Here are the high important warnings or the high importance warnings. Here are the medium importance warnings, and here are the ones that you maybe don't need to worry about too much. But you're basically going in and saying, you got a problem. You've got 100 red alerts on your website, and we can help you solve those. The other way to sell it is more obviously of the topic that we want to talk about today, which is a return on investment. And it's definitely the harder of the two ways, but I think that you have an opportunity to better speak the language of that business owner and be able to really establish a longer-term relationship.
So it seems to me, before you move into it, that that binary way of selling SEO strikes me as perhaps a little dated in 2015. I'm not sure what your opinion is, but going back 4 or 5 years, SEO was more of a technical event you did to your website, so it was either, quote, optimized or not. And it strikes me as, versus what I think you're about to get into, is really talking about SEO as a vibrant marketing channel. But do you see a lot of people still selling it as a binary event, or is that pretty much gone the wayside?
It's interesting, Adam. I think that some people, I've seen it a little more recently than I had maybe in the year before, or in the couple years before it. So I'm not sure if there's just it's a post-Penguin algorithm update thing where people are kind of going back to these things they can really hold on to. But I do think my main point here is I think it's a lower revenue product. I think that these tend to be one-time projects. They're not recurring revenue. You're not aligned with the business and the growth of the business. So I don't really think it's a. I think if you want to sell that check the box SEO, as I've called it, I think you're talking about lots and lots of small projects that don't tend to last and recur over many, many months. So again, I think just wanted to sort of set this up because I actually think that there's a hybrid approach, which is what we've been talking about in our most recent proposal, which is this kind of stuff actually is very good because it gets people to open their eyes a little bit to maybe there are some issues that can be immediately addressed. And it also is a great way for you to demonstrate value that you've gone in and done some analysis and you understand their website. So you're not just coming in saying, let me close you on this deal. You're coming in saying, like, I've done the analysis and here are things that we can do to immediately help you. And then here's the longer-term opportunity. So the second way, and the way that I think HubShout, as you said, Adam, we see the right way to look at selling SEO is to focus on the opportunity and the value. So really, this requires that you understand the client's business and present the business opportunity. You want to do things like compare competitors. You want to size the possible search and revenue opportunities. So I pulled in a couple screenshots from, again, our last webinar where we talked about our new sales proposal, and you can see here that what we've done is we've taken a prospect, in this case a1serviceplumbing.com, and then we've pulled in 2 people who ranked highly on some of the terms that this client looks like they should be ranking on, and then are using those 2 competitors to sort of establish the opportunity. Hey, a1serviceplumbing.com, you're only really getting $215. The value of your organic rankings using our calculation is $215. Your competitors have, significantly more value coming in from their organic rankings. You need to address that because these guys will beat you if you don't address the gap that you have in front of you today. We've said this many times, but it's important in this process of defining the ROI of SEO that we say it again. SEO is definitely a winner-take-all approach. I found a great new tool. It's probably been around a little while, but I haven't looked in a couple months for what the click-through rates are by position. But Advanced Web Ranking, they did a study in 2014. Their methodology was actually pretty interesting. They win it because Google now shows in Webmaster Tools your impressions and your click-through rate on different terms. They were able to go in and gather quite a bit of data and actually see what Google was reporting the click-through rate to be. Now, I'm sure some of us might say, well, how much can you really trust Webmaster Tools data? But I actually think it's probably as good as some of the eye tracking studies that people have done that are obviously much smaller sample sizes. So I think this is pretty good, and it's not too far off from what we've seen many, many times, which is that it's a winner-take-all. Position 1 through 3 has an average click-through rate of 19%, and then it drops down to 5% for the rest of page 1, and it keeps going down from there. interestingly enough, their click-through rate studies for page 2 and 3, or page 2 at least, were like 2.5% or something. So it was interesting to see they, in some cases, you can even see here that they look like the click-through rate on page 2 rankings actually was slightly higher than 6 and 10. So interesting that their survey showed that. But the point being here that really you need to be in position 1.1 to 3 to really get that massive click-through rate. And you can see even position 1, you're up in 31 or 32% there compared to 2, which drops down very quickly to 14. Okay, so what I want to do is I put together a spreadsheet that I want to review and have everyone take a look at some scenarios I put together. And there's a little math involved here, but I want to explain what I've done. Feel free to stop me if I'm going too fast. So the first thing that I want to start with is I want to start with how I would approach having a discussion with a reseller. I'm sorry, with a prospective client. So the first thing I would want to understand is the value of their customer. And again, you want to make sure that they're not lowballing it, because these models are very sensitive to these types of to what the value of a customer is. So if it's a roofing customer and sometimes they have repair jobs and sometimes they have the big jobs, you want to make sure that you get into who they really are targeting, because when we pick the keywords, obviously we're going to be focusing on the jobs they want to that they're intending to go after. So if they want to do roof replacements, not roof repairs, then we should be working on value of customer around the roof replacement side of things. So you need a value of a customer. The other thing you need to do is, especially when you're talking about someone who converts things offline, you need to understand what their lead to customer rate is. And for most of you who have been on some of our SOW kickoff calls or had discussions with our account managers, you know that we ask some of these same questions to you. But this is all about, for every lead they get that comes out of their website or makes a phone call to their business, what % of those actually become customers? So in this case, I've said that it's a value of a customer is 2,000, lead to customer rate is 25%. So that means the value of a lead is $500. So just that, sometimes that number, a lot of businesses don't even think about that. They don't even think that, hey, the value of this lead is actually $500. So when these things come in, they're really, really important, because this is $500 that I'm potentially just throwing away if I don't get back to them quickly. So that's the first thing that we do. Now, for this model, what I kind of wanted to look at was like how many, I sort of did, again, a bottoms up, like what's asking this person, like how much new business are you looking for, so that we could sort of size up the plan that we would need in order to get them that business. So in this case, this customer is, in my fictitious scenario here, my scenario here is looking for 5 new customers a month. Well, then I know that I need to get 20 leads, right? Because if I need 5 customers, I need 20 leads that convert at 25% to customers. That's how that's the math there. So I need 20 leads a month. I know that what I actually, again, an assumption here I make is that the website conversion rate is 8%. For those of you, then this again is the model's super sensitive to this conversion rate. So if you get a client whose conversion rate on their website is 1%, you're most likely not going to be able to get to a point where their ROI is positive. You need to be able, and think about that, it makes sense. That means 99% of the people that come to their website leave. You can't be in business if 99% of the people that walk in your store turn around and walk out. It's hard to be in business, honestly, if 92% with an 8% conversion come in your store and walk out. But in this model, it works. So you want to be sensitive to that and understand this, because that's also an opportunity. If you come and you have somebody whose conversion rate is 1% or 2%, you need to sell them a new website. You need to sell them website optimization, something to get that website up. It could even be just as simple as like doing an exit intent pop-up, like we have on our website for the daily brown bag. When you're leaving our website, we pop up something saying, "Hey, join our mailing list." Well, that helps us down the road maybe convert people into a lead that we can work with. So that 8% is super critical. Well, based on that, it means that I need to get 250 visitors, qualified targeted visitors on keywords that matter, to my website. Again, let's do the math on that. 250 visitors, 8%, it's going to get me my 20 leads. at 25%, it's going to get me my 5 customers, and everybody's happy. Okay, so kind of working from there. Let's keep going. Any questions so far on this, Adam?
There are.
Okay.
I've just been typing fast and furiously here.
Okay.
One is you mentioned this exit intent pop-up, and there was a question: is that a service that we offer currently?
Yeah, it's on our dev priority plan, our dev pipeline. It's not something we offer today. There are currently other people out there that offer similar services that range from very expensive to not very expensive. But I think it's a good way, especially if you have an offer and you're trying to grab someone on the way out the door. It's a good way to keep people engaged. They tend to work, as far as I can tell. The conversion rates are usually about 1 to 2% on those, which is good. That's 1 to 2 extra percent over what your website was converting at just by putting this thing on your website.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I was actually going to ask some of the account managers in the room, have you guys recommended to any of your resellers that they put one of these exit pop-up? Nick saying he has. Anyone else had that discussion? So it seems like something we should definitely be talking to them about. There are good options out there in the marketplace, and we're thinking about folding one in ourselves if we get enough demand. So I think that's a good one as well, Chad. Here's another question for you. Someone said, can we get the link to this spreadsheet? I'm assuming you're going to say the answer is yes.
Yes, you can get the link to the spreadsheet. Yeah.
But I responded, though, our goal today is really to make sure not only you have the material, but you feel comfortable having a discussion around the numbers that are in it, and I think that's one of the hard parts. So let's get all the way through Chad's numbers and make sure people are feeling like they can do that. Earlier I'd asked people, Chad, when you were talking about the binary way of selling SEO optimization versus long-term, what approach they use. Someone said, well, I really always go in looking for long-term ROI because I think I want to build recurring revenue, which is something you had said, Chad. Someone else said, we don't sell anything shorter than a 6-month deal, but we try to get a 12-month term. I thought that was a comment that's important to share, particularly if newer folks coming into the reseller space are selling short-term contracts, 90 days or even month for month. We really don't recommend that. If you're going to be in that short-term cycle, be in PPC and then move people to longer-term contracts on SEO. And I think that's all I had. And actually one person was a little confused, Chad, on your slide about our proposals earlier on, but I told them there's another webinar on that, and they should go watch it. So we should make sure that that's posted so we can send that out. Yeah,
definitely. I've got that here in the end. Okay, excellent. So I kind of put this blue line here because really this first part is all the work you need to do that really is just getting into the person's business. This blue line in some ways is then kind of where we pick things up from there, and then we can sort of figure out the keywords and where to go once you get below this line. So let's talk about that. So we've established here that 250 visitors are required in order to get our 5 customers. If we assume that the search click-through rate is 19%, that's the average of being in 1, 2, or 3, which is just the holy grail. It's where we need to be, 1, 2, or 3. Then what that means is we need to have ourselves come up on 1,316 monthly searches, and then our our link would be in the first 3 slots. So that gets us to basically like how many searches we need to get in order to get all the way down to our 5 customers. Now, what I did is I said this is where it gets a little bit into sort of how we go about picking keywords. What I said is that of those 1,316, for those of you familiar with our keyword planner and how we go about selecting keywords, it doesn't mean that, the way we would typically take that, it doesn't mean that you need to have your keyword bucket list add up to 1,316, because what we think is that for every head term click you get, there will be 1 long tail multiplier. Okay, so I put this again, the model is very sensitive to this. So what that means, again, if you go into Webmaster Tools, you'll see this. For every Orlando plumber, there's going to be some 2 or 3 or 4 word term that you never really planned on targeting as a keyword that happened to come in just because your website ranked on Orlando plumber. So the reason the 658 is important is because, well, it's 1316 divided by 2. And then what we need to do in order to hit this client's goal is we need to go into, again, our keyword planner, and we need to find 658 what I would call head terms for this business. And we made the assumption that the average CPC is $5. And what that's going to get you is the 658 times 5 is going to say that, and again, this is the way we come up with keywords, and we've got webinars on this, but what we would recommend on this is we would recommend a plan that's about $1,600 wholesale that would allow them to target about $3,289 retail in keyword value. So then, yep.
So before you go on to the return on investment analysis over time, just scroll back up. I want to stop and make sure everybody followed that piece, particularly that piece around the long tail multiplier, but also, not just to the folks in the webinar, but also in the room, particularly the account managers. Any questions on what Chad just hit on how he did his math? You guys are obviously very intimately familiar with how we do keyword selection, how we use our spreadsheet, and we use the CPC and the estimator to kind of figure out the value of that. But he's introduced this new concept here on line 16 of his spreadsheet where we have this long tail multiplier, which is an assumption of this financial model, and I think a very conservative one, by the way. Having studied our analytics for the 7 or 8 years we've been in business and looked at thousands of accounts as they come through here, I actually think you could easily argue that should be 3 or 4, but we want to have this be conservative and defensible, so we put in 2, which means, as Chet said, for every time you get a hit on one of those keywords that's in our bucket, we're going to pick up another one on a long tail, broad match, phrase match variation that isn't in our list but is very closely related, that was the result of our SEO activities. Does that make sense to you guys? Does anyone have questions on that? Challenges, thoughts? I'm getting a lot of head nods. No one's raising their hand though, Chet.
Yeah.
I think that's good. Or we baffle them. I'm
Well,
not really sure.
I think in a second, like that part's the trickiest part right there, and that is it's kind of the magic of, and I shouldn't use the word magic, but it's a little bit of the assumptions we have to make to try to figure out what keywords are appropriate for a budget. So how much money does it take to rank on keywords? It's tricky, and we've had different approaches over the years. We think our current one really it's using the average cost per click as a proxy for how competitive a term is. So obviously the higher the cost per click, the more people believe it's valuable to rank on that term organically. And so that's kind of the trick here. But we've got a lot of other content, and we can even hit this again in another webinar on how to pick keywords. But let's keep going with this, and then we can come back if we need to. So if I take that information and then I plug it in to what I did is I just, in this spreadsheet, just went out across literally 24 months, so 2 years, and I said, this client is going to pay $32.89 a month, okay? And again, that would be roughly $1,600 wholesale to HubShout and $1,600 to you, the reseller, but the client's paying $32.89, so that's their investment, and that investment's going to go on here for a long time. And what you're going to see here is I then map out that in the first 3 months they're not going to get any customers, okay, because they're nowhere in the rankings, so they're 999 or something, they're 500, 600, or nowhere in the rankings at all. At month 4, we've been working for 3 months, and we get a little business. We're starting to get a little things. Maybe some of the easier phrases start to come in, and we're getting a couple leads off that. So in this case, we actually got in month 4 5 leads and we turned one of those into a customer. I'm sorry, 4 leads. And we turned one of those into a customer. And same thing in month 5. We're just starting to get there. We turn another one into a customer. We're getting a few more rankings in month 6. We get 2 customers. Month 7, we get 2 customers. Month 8, we get 3 customers. Month 9, we get 3 customers. It's not until really the end of the first year, month 12, that we're really at the place that guy wanted to be, the 5 leads a month. So it took us a whole year to get there, okay? But then all the way through month 12, all the way on out to month 24, we stay right where he wants us to be, which is 5 customers, he's still paying $32.89 a month that whole time. So what I did is I also calculated that we said each customer's worth $2,000. So, every month he's getting this $2,000 in customer value that he's bringing in each month. So that's all great. But really what we wanted to see then is, how does this look? How does this look from a ROI standpoint? When is this guy going to be making money? Is he going to call me at 30 days and say, hey, where are my leads? So this is very useful, because you see here at 3 months, he is in the hole $9,868 and hasn't made a penny off of his SEO, right? At 6 months, he's still negative, but he has some money in his account at that point. He's made $8,000, but he is not, again, if they call up, they're not going to be too happy, because they've paid $19,000 at this point, and they only have, 4 new customers. Okay, I've been on many of these calls, right? We've all been on these calls where you're 6 months in and they're not too happy, and they thought that they heard you say, or maybe they didn't hear you say, that it was a long-term investment, but they didn't realize how long the long-term investment really meant. Well, at the end of the first year, they're now positive. They now have $50,000 in new customer value, and they've spent $39,474 with you. They're going to be okay. They're actually going to be happy. Adam and I were discussing whether you'd be happy about this or just okay. You'd be somewhere between happy and okay. Again, it's not quite the silver bullet magic thing that you thought SEO was supposed to be, but now at least you've made more money than you've spent. But the real magic happens as you get further out, right? Because what happens is that first year of paying starts to become a smaller and smaller amount of the customers you've actually gotten. And so then you can see here at 18 months, 6 months after that, they're getting pretty happy. They now have $110,000 on their $60,000 investment. At 24 months, they have $170,000 on their $78,000, 115% ROI. And at 36 months, they're up to $290,000 over the 118, 144. And you can imagine that this would continue to grow. At some point, it's going to sort of plateau a little bit, because you will have recouped so much of that. The earlier investment is now spread out over so many months. But here's the other thing. This assumes that it just stays at 5 forever. More than likely, into year 2 or even into year 1, when you get through the first year and into the second and third year, you more than likely would be picking up incremental visitors. You would be adding new keywords in, and that 5 would probably at some point start growing. So even if they kept the budget the same, it's very possible that ROI could accelerate as they moved out in those years. But I think what we all struggle with is really month 3 through 6, right? Because those are just hard times in SEO. And if you don't show the client this, and they don't understand how this works, then I think a lot of them just kind of lose faith, because they assume, even though, again, you told them, they assume that by month, I'm only getting 2 customers, and I've spent $19,000, or I guess I've gotten 4 customers, I've spent $19,000, I'm in the hole big time. And they are. At that point, they are. But if they quit then they will always be in the hole. But if they can see it through, and we can deliver the goods of getting them up on those keywords, and again, you see the nice thing about it is even at 6 months, at least there's some money on the board, so they can see that these guys they're not totally wrong, right? It's just I don't feel good about it, but it's not really until, again, at the end of the first year, and maybe it would have been a little before the end, it was probably like the 9th month or something, but towards the end of the first year, that was really the break even for this project.
Which, Chad, that's not bad. 9 months to a positive return on investment for a marketing initiative. I mean, the real headline to the story is that's why SEO is such a growth industry. That's crazy good. I mean, I've in my previous life had done pitches with venture capitalists, Sequoia, Mid-Atlantic, Trident. I've asked for millions of dollars. I've gone in with the return on investment stories weaker than this. This is good. This is good, but I do think it takes some education, and I do think Chad's right, and it's why we said it up front. You can't sell this as a transaction. You flip the switch and the leads start coming. That's how you sell PPC. You have to sell this as you're building equity in your domain. And yes, as it takes time, it takes a lot longer, but the bigger returns are there. Now, also, Chad, I want to emphasize what you said. You're starting to see some customers trickle in, so there's a little bit of the signals that it's working, and even beyond the customers, you're seeing those rankings move. They were on page nowhere, then they were on page 15, then they're on page 7 or 8, and at 6 months in, you're seeing those dramatically move. And the whole team here, we've been reviewing rankings for the last few weeks, visiting some of our Main Street American customers and seeing them, and they do have dramatic moves. Even the ones that aren't on page 1, you can see it right there on page 3, about to break. It's coming up to the big competition, but it's making good progress. So I think you really do have to learn how to speak with confidence about really what's a realistic return on investment horizon. You really think that should be 2 months and it's positive? Well, people who sell you a product like that, newsflash, it doesn't work. If it was that easy, why are they selling it? They wouldn't. They just keep it for themselves. This is a realistic and well thought out return on investment analysis, Chad. I like it a lot.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm just looking at some of the questions that have come in here, and a lot of this again comes back. This model is sensitive to all these inputs. You can, like I said, if your website conversion rate is 6%, let's go look at this. What happens here? Now you're basically got to get to 18 months before you're positive, right? Because those customers didn't happen quite as quickly as you wanted. So it is very sensitive to the model or to some of these input parameters, and you have to kind of go through and plug some of this data in. We're happy again to share the spreadsheet. I'm sure that there are cases where maybe you need to look at something a little differently. There's a whole different kind of methodology you could probably use for calculating ROI, which would be based more on the rankings themselves and using the rankings and saying that like having rankings equals about X amount of value and cost per click advertising or CPC advertising. So there's different ways to look at this. I like this one because it just sort of was very much based on leads and how many customers they want, and then again looking at something, a real like plan of how many customers they have. So this is like dollars in their bank versus this amorphous thing of rankings and the value of a ranking. They only care about it if it converts into visitor, into leads, and then visitor into customers.
Chad, I have a question for you along those lines. It's a good one. This person wrote in, many times I see our competitors choosing keywords that have very low volume, like 0 searches a month, and I believe they're selecting these keywords because they'll be easy to rank for. Easy rankings, of course, typically means 0 traffic. What are our best practices when considering keyword volumes and attaching the right keywords for a campaign?
Yeah, Adam, I think the other day we said we used the Goldilocks approach to that, right? We want the keywords to be just right. They need to not be 0, so they can't be too easy, because the problem if they're too easy, there's no traffic, so there's no customers and leads at a given point. But at the same time, they can't be too hard. So going after a monster term that we have no chance ever of ranking on doesn't really make sense either. So we need to pick the ones that are in the middle, the ones that are just right, the ones that have some search volume, but they're not so competitive that we can't get them to rank on those terms. And again, we've been, and many of you probably who have recently signed new programs with us, we've been watching this like a hawk. I mean, we really now have it so that we're not even going to accept any money for a new project until we have a chance to really make sure that the keywords we're targeting are the right keywords. And that usually we're rejecting them when they're too hard, but the same is true. I mean, we're going to make sure that we add the number of keywords that is appropriate for the plan you've selected, which again is based on volume and the estimated cost per click as a measure of competitiveness.
Chad, I think that's a great answer. So, the Goldilocks approach, it's just right. I'm not opposed to having maybe one easy keyword in there, as well as one stretch target, as long as it all works across the math. The reason you want an easy one in, it's kind of the canary in the coal mine theory. In those first 6 months where we're really going to test their faith and we're going to test our credibility, do I still believe these guys? Is this really working? It'd be great to have that one keyword fly up, even though it doesn't have a lot of traffic, just to show them the methodology is working. We're doing great on-site work. We're doing good content marketing. We're earning some good links. Look, the keyword's moving. They need a little bit of that to keep the faith. But as the person who wrote into the chat window said, if they're all like that, which we have seen some competitors do, it's a short-term game, and it will not end well. You'll get fired. So we talk about this a great deal internally. Don't chase bad deals. Have courage in your sales process, and that means saying no sometimes to bad deals, even though that's easy money you might desperately need. Have courage. Sign the right deals. We've had Google come in and train us on sales, and they say the same thing. You need the right customers who understand your value proposition, who have the right orientation, and have a good fit with your product. Because if you accumulate the wrong customers, you'll have a heck of a time. All sorts of bad things happen. So you don't want to chase bad deals. You don't want to take the easy money. It may look attractive, but it's not. You want to build a real business based on those just right results, where you can really feel good about your team, the people you work with, what you're accomplishing, and with the customer value. All those things have to come together. And they can if you use these tools and the analysis really understand this, and you speak with courage and conviction and know your stuff, which is what's exciting about today, Chad, is we're training on how to do this so everyone on the phone or on the table can do this.
Absolutely. And someone asked earlier, so we will have the spreadsheet available when we post the webinar. We'll make sure there's links to it. I shared it on Google Docs so people can grab it and download it and use it themselves. And Adam, as you said, the whole point about having the courage up front to sometimes turn away those bad deals, it is not easy. I know that. It's sometimes easier just to take that deal. But like you said, it's way better to up front be honest and come up with a better plan, and then that way you're not dealing with somebody 90 days from then who's really unhappy with you. Those are not fun calls.
Yeah, Jed, we're all on those calls. They stink. Nick and I were just talking about those calls yesterday. A couple comments that came in. Ben said, well said, Adam, not everyone is a good fit, so cut those bad leads loose fast. Yeah, Ben, I appreciate that comment. That's right on. Someone else said, great narrative. I wanted to say thank you. Yeah, we're obviously very passionate about this. That clearly shows, but it's because we've studied it and we really think it's right, and we think together we can be so much stronger if we all embrace this and learn it, move through any of our fears, and really sell with courage.
There were a few questions that actually came in because we had asked for questions when we sent the webinar invites out, so I wanted to address those really fast here. So the first one was, how many hours does it take to optimize a home services business in the Atlanta area? And I wanted to, I think this was, I put this one up because the question was, how many hours a week do you spend doing this? And really, again, I think that it's very difficult to answer that question in a number of hours that are spent, because so much of, if you've listened to some of our recent webinars on the different improvements we've made to our product with press team and with the publishing partners and various other things, there's a lot of time that goes into actually just establishing the opportunity for promoting your client's website. So, really at the end of the day, we think what we just showed is the better way to represent the ROI. You don't want to get into a situation with your client where you're just selling hours, because that's, you'll lose at that, right? Because there's always going to be somebody who will do it based on hours for a cheaper price. You're going to get someone who's going to Odesk or some other place. So again, you want to sell it on the value. You want to show the ROI. You want to certainly show the benefits of the program. And there is, unfortunately, still a lot of the same SEO that's been going on for many years out there, who people have not really changed their product and many times have a lower price point. But it's just, you have to understand that if that stuff isn't working, so don't get caught trying to sell it by the hour. Is there a sales script? I'm going to answer that question on the next slide. And then one other one was, I'm curious about more hyperlocal sales and ROI justification to a city area of around 15 square miles and smaller populations. Again, I think the ROI calculator we just went through applies to pretty much any scenario. You're just going to be dealing with smaller numbers. I will tell you there, though, that the one real sensitive element is the value of that customer. So if you have a client, if you know that the clients you're targeting don't have, if the value of a client is low for them, sometimes it's hard to get the ROI of SEO to be positive. But that's the same is true for any marketing, right? If and Adam, we tested out and at one point had a little arm that was working with the veterinarian business, and really the most sensitive issue in that business was the value of a client to them was low, or at least the perceived value of a client was low, because they either didn't know that what the real value of the client was, or it really was pretty low. So make sure. So I guess lesson learned there is make sure that the clients you're targeting ideally have a valuable service. Their average customer value is not in the teens or hundreds. Ideally, it's multiple hundreds, and ideally in the thousands. A couple things I put in here. The sales script. Someone said, what do we have a sales script? What I would do is, first of all, just make a couple recommendations. We have a lot of content in this area, and also your account manager is willing to help out with any of this information or attend our 4 p.m. training session, and we can definitely help point you in the right direction. But the first thing is, make sure it's about them, not you. We had a webinar a couple times ago where we had Tom Marin on the phone, and he talked about branding, and that was his number one point, was that make sure you define your business, you define everything about what you do around your customer, make it about them, not about you. I think that's very much true in sales as well, especially around proposals and working through a pitch. You want to make it about them, not you. So I would say do your homework on their business and make sure you have an understanding of what their opportunity is before the meeting. The last webinar we did, where we introduced our new pre-sales proposal, we talked about how what we were doing was doing a site audit, and then as well as keyword research to try to establish some of that value, size up the opportunity, so when you do go talk to the client, you have something very useful to them, not just, hey, I want to sell you a plan for $800. There's also 2 webinars that we've done in the last 6 months or so that I think would be very useful to help answer this question. One is we have the secret to selling SEO, and in that presentation, webinar, we go through all of the different materials and content that we have. And then we also have one, the Google Trusted Digital Media Advisor. These will both be live links, and when we post this tomorrow, that goes to a webinar that we did, again, earlier this year or late last year, where we talked about some of the information we learned from having Google come to us and train us on their Trusted Digital Media Advisor, which, again, is all about setting up an agenda, making sure that very clearly up front when you first sit down with someone in a sales pitch that you establish the agenda, you understand what the flow is going to be, and get organized so that you don't just come in and start talking but never really have a chance to listen. That's all I have. I did want to wrap up, Adam. If we don't have any other questions, I want to wrap up with one system update component, but do we have any questions?
I think just a few people want to know where they can get the spreadsheet so they can study it, and then they'll probably have follow-up questions. And again, I want to reiterate, we're available every day at 4 o'clock in a session that Chris Wibby leads. I'm there, Matt's there, Eric's there, usually several account managers. Be happy to review that spreadsheet, even practice pitches, open up your mic, and I'll do role-play pitches on each other on explaining this. We really think it's very valuable that everybody can articulate the math behind the business case for SEO. It's a booming industry, and it's growing for a reason because these numbers are so strong, but if we can't articulate that with credibility, you won't close that deal and you won't keep that customer. So I urge you to come to the 4 p.m. session and let's practice it up.
Excellent. We announced this in the forum, but it's always great to, while we have a captive audience here, to make sure that everyone else got the word through our forum update. But we redesigned the admin screen, which really is the reseller tab, if you will. We just don't want to call it the reseller tab in case you have a client logged in. We don't want to have that name there because we want this to be as white labeled as possible. So we have a new screen. When you first log in, it will take you to admin. And I want to point out a couple things. First of all, you're going to see a section here where you can add new accounts. This will take you directly to a proposal screen where we are working on adding in the ability for you to actually request one of our pre-sales proposals. But you start that here. So you want to add a new account. We've simplified the amount of information you need You no longer have to create a username, or you no longer have the fields here to create the username and password. We're going to push that back to later in the process where we think it makes more sense. The next thing you see here is your SEO scorecard. These are a couple of reporting only accounts, but you would actually automatically see your accounts. I had to select a reseller to view. So you would see all your accounts here that are active with to-dos, organic visits, rankings, page one rankings, and leads. You're going to see your account management information on the right with contact info. You're going to see your reseller details. So this is your information. You have the ability to go in and edit that information. So if, for example, you need to change your billing, your credit card, you click Edit Details. It's going to take you to the reseller details screen where you can then make those changes. That's also where you can change portal branding information, your notification email address, your Amazon SES information. All of that's over here under Reseller Details. We added 6 other modules here that will help, I think, answer some of the questions that we often get. The first one is active web development projects. So this is going to show any of your projects that are currently in our web development department along with their due date. So the nice thing there is that if we're working on an on-site implementation, then you would see that here, you would see the due date, you would know exactly when that was going to be through our process. Any other active services, so you'll see if you have things other than SEO, this box will actually show you, module will show you all of the other services that you have active with us. And then there's 2 other important modules here. One is My Active Tasks. What that's going to do is show you the last task that you actually made, that you updated. So it's the most recent updates that you made. And then the task needing review is going to be all of the tasks that need your input to move forward. Final 2 things here are active proposals and project requirement questionnaires. So active proposals are any proposals that we have, that you would have open with us. So this would be anything that you had requested a proposal on, or that you had worked on a proposal. You'd be able to get to that quickly here. And then finally, the project requirements questionnaire. That's going to be any questionnaire that we need you to sign, that we either need you to fill out or sign off on. So again, our new process is that when you're ready to launch a campaign, you have to fill out the project requirements questionnaire. That gathers all that information that we used to have to chase down for the first couple of weeks, which just slowed everything down. We said, look, let's get that all done up front so that the day that you pay, we are off to the races on that same day, rather than having to chase everybody down for a couple weeks and potentially slow the whole campaign down. Because we know from looking at that ROI, if we lose a month to just administrative stuff, that's 1 month that guy is not going to get 1 of those leads or 2 of those leads, which is going to impact his calculation. So we need to hit the ground running. That's why we've added this section in here. Well, that's all we have for today. We appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing you in the forum, the 4 o'clock training session, or to give your account manager a phone call. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.